That means you're a genius.
No,
Yes,
it just
exactly.
means I'm
High
lucky.
five.
It just means I'm lucky.
We're starting. Wow, that was like perfect time. Okay,
Physics is easy.
so we got new mics today,
Yay.
but we don't have a tripod.
Oh.
So he has to stand like that the whole meeting.
We need to appreciate
Oh.
We have a
Matt's
bipod.
Steadicam skills.
So- So Patrick actually started editing some of our videos so that we can be just about ready to actually upload some
First
of them.
3 are probably going to go up this week, so
Awesome.
Yay. Make sure you have the login info.
yeah, you probably need to email that again to me.
Okay. So we're gonna basically continue last week's, the thing that we did at the end of last week's meeting. Yeah. So
TF2?
part 2 of the
Yeah.
TF2 discussion.
What direction are we going for this time?
Well,
And in every direction.
last
Oh,
time we
okay.
talked about why Patrick didn't like it, and that went on like a series of tangents of how accessible the game is and certain mechanics that are confusing and why it's so different from other first-person shooters. But this time, I have a couple other topics that we can cover. So, last time we touched loosely on the characters and a lot of the characters, at least the art style. One thing that we talked about was the silhouettes, how they designed it based on giving the player information like, oh, which class is it, which team are they on, and what weapon are they holding. And that's why the silhouettes are such a big deal in the art style. But we didn't talk much about the actual characters themselves. Like, if you look at all of the characters, they have pretty awesome and unique personalities. Is there anyone who has like thoughts on that issue? Like, why were they able to do it so well? And what aspects of these characters?
Well, they put a lot of money in the heavy weapon, cost $400,000.
Like
Shoot
Livio,
the
you
weapon
talked
So-
about just
10
like
seconds.
things like art direction or like just character.
I'm thinking like
Just something.
character design, really. Like not just art direction, but art direction does influence it,
Yeah.
and vice versa. Like one thing that I've always noticed is like if you've seen the meet the whatever videos, meet the
Yeah,
meet the team,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
those really expand on the characters, and I think it's awesome.
I think it's like the way that the actual character player is supposed to feel when they play the character, and then they kind of tell them what they're supposed to be. It's not supposed to be very serious. It's supposed to be, I talk to heads, soldier. Yeah, and
Yeah.
like you're supposed to feel like you're shooting rockets everywhere, as opposed to the doctor. You're supposed to make people have hearts.
You're a crazy medic.
Yeah, you go insane, and it adds to, like, as a scout, you're supposed to feel cocky, and run away a lot, and run,
Doesn't
and
it
it,
also-
that's reflected in his personality.
doesn't it also affect the way the gameplay?
Yeah.
It, like it kind. I don't
Yeah.
know if if it's the right way to say it actually marries the personalities with their functions. Like, or sometimes, like, isn't the medic like a subversion of like what you think? Like, oh, he should be helpful. No, he's a mad scientist. He's like it's a subversion of the character.
I think
Like the entire Meet the Medic was about the Uber charge. Like, it wasn't completely direct. It was a story. It had the part where the heavy was implanted with, like, he exploded the heart, and you're like, oh shit, there's that moment. And then he put in the heart in there, and then he puts the medic thing onto the heavy, and then there's that respite stage where you're like, okay, now what? And then he killed the heavy, and the medic proceed to kill everybody, and that's the end. And it's like, that's kind of what you do as the medic.
Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense because it's trying to show off why like that class is cool. The medic is really cool.
Yeah.
Especially to like a new player where you don't know all the 50 different medic guns that have different effects. Where it's just, hey, you start with this gun that makes it so you and somebody else aren't invincible. This is pretty awesome.
you can also overheal them,
Yeah.
which is pretty awesome. But I think it goes back to how when they were designing the classes, they said that each class is like a little experience in a box where you pick the kind of experience you want and then you go into it. And just having the characterization on each class makes that little experience feel a lot more complete. It's not just changing the mechanics, you're changing the whole mood, the whole persona.
Yeah, it's like a different game.
Yeah, and it makes it just a lot more fun to like see all these characters together interacting, even if it's just marketing, like in their little movies.
Well, what I want to know is why they didn't put any female characters into TF2.
The video gaming
But-
industry is sexist. What can you say?
But I
Throw
mean
'em
like,
out.
but what I'm saying is like when they released Orange Box, Shell is a female, the protagonist for Portal, but then they have no females in TF2. But they do have a protagonist in Half-Life
Strongest
2.
on the base.
So
Yeah,
that's
and-
what I don't understand. I was
and-
like, wait.
And it really doesn't make sense because the whole idea of having so many classes is so that you can pick the player that
Yeah,
best
for
represents you.
Yeah, diversity.
And
That
so-
resonates with you.
Well, isn't it like, I think like it started off with a mod, and in the mod was about the classes and the distinct classes. And if there was ideas of like a lady or feminism, it doesn't matter which sex it is, as long, like, if it matters what sex it is, it should add to the gameplay. Like, I'm not
Are you
sure.
trying to say I'm weaker than you?
Well, let's say I put a female character in the game, she would have to have the personality that would add to the experience of either being a
Yeah, but
female
you
or
could-
having traits that are female.
You could imagine that.
Like flexibility or something, like the scout would be, but it would be more of like intelligence.
Well, I mean, at its core,
Or
all
That's
dexterity.
kind of sexist.
seems like all
Well,
the
they are
classes
more
are kind of a
dexterous.
stereotype.
Yeah.
It seems
So
it's
it's-
very reminiscent of Looney Tunes in a way, like just the exact design. It's like there's not a lot
Yeah.
of female characters and like prominent female characters in Looney Tunes. So it's,
But-
I think that's where I'm getting. It's like, hey, let's do our take on this type of style. But
Yeah.
they didn't care too much about gender. I mean, it would have been great if you had like each of them have their female counterparts essentially. Like,
That would have been
hey,
cool.
are you a Hey, do you like to play a female heavy? Okay,
So-
sure.
Sure.
Bring it on.
So I actually asked this question on Quora, why aren't there female characters in TF2? And somebody responded with a link to an interview with one of the lead designers in TF2. They said that the original plan was to have female counterparts to all the classes, but they made all of the male classes first, and they realized that they just didn't have the time and the money to develop all the female classes. And in hindsight, he said that they probably should have just decided some classes would be male, some would be female. But they didn't do that because they were kind of hopeful that they would find the money and the budget to do that. Especially since, how long was the game in development? It was like several years.
Really long.
Yeah.
A long time.
And so they already had that big luxury, and they were kind of growing used to it. And then when they were in production, they're like, we'll probably figure out how to do that later. And then they never made the hard choice. Okay, which classes are going to be male, which one are going to be female. They just kind of got cut off and say, no, we need a ship already.
Well, I think the part where the sort of subtle sexism came in was that the male was the default.
Yeah, definitely.
Then you don't want to subvert to too many overt stereotypes with like, oh, the female's definitely a medic.
What were you saying?
Oh, so just a question, how do we know that there isn't already a female in Team Fortress 2?
The pyro.
No, that's fine.
Well, there's the announcer.
That's what I was thinking.
No, but like I remember seeing in the closed captioning for Meet the Pyro, the scout said he's not here, is she? So it's a little ambiguity, but it's a he.
I think that was just the team like messing with people, just being like, let's just mess with viewers on how vague we're being about this character.
I love the pyro. The design of the pyro. And playing as the pyro.
OP Pyro.
Most fun character to play as Pyro.
But Rock
High
is, I like the soldier because he jumped over soldiers.
Yeah, rocket jump everywhere.
It's so great. I do not like 2 Fort though. It's very
2 Fort?
confusing.
I love 2 Fort.
Well, once you get used to it, but for new players, there's so many quirks to the environment that it's really confusing, and it's easy
Oh, yeah.
just to engineer like that one spot.
Or
Have you
just-
ever-
or just snipe from the battlements.
Yeah, and like if you know the quirks, yeah, you can get it. But as a new player, that map is evil.
Oh yeah, it is. Especially when you're trying to figure out how to get to the intelligence.
Yeah, and you're like, where am I going? I don't understand, and you don't. But when it comes to like, I don't know, pushing the cart, it's kind of easier.
Have you ever played any of the variations of that map? Like either really old, outdated variations or some user-made versions of it?
2-4? No.
I've played a couple, and it's really interesting when you compare the two, because you see why certain things are in certain places and what the effect are when they're removed. Like, I remember one that had the roof over the bridge that had that removed, and that just made it really imbalanced because everyone could just snipe everyone coming down. And there was another one that removed the water underneath, so you could actually walk down there. Yeah, it's really interesting. Those. Speaking of game modes, which like 2-4 is a capture the flag one. Which ones are like your favorite game modes to play, or do you usually find yourself playing as?
I usually play any of them.
Any of them? Random?
Yeah.
I played like the capture the point ones, so or
Control
I forget
points?
what they're called. So yeah,
Yeah.
control points.
There are a few variations of control points. There's like one that's attack defend. One team's attacking, the other team's defending. Then there's one where both teams are attacking. There's like a balance.
Yeah, I do. I like the attack defend ones, just because I like that. You know, the enemies are in this direction, so you either build your defenses here, or you know, you go over there and fight them, or whatever it's going to be. You know, if you're on offense, you know, sort of you're going to attack from this direction or something like that, or this is where the defender's sort of likely to set up, and when you're defending, you just have to cover wherever people are attacking from. So
I find that I usually play either King of the Hill, where there's only one control point, and Capture the Flag. Those are like my two favorite modes.
I think one of the cool things about just 2-4 capture the flag, just because it's become so standard, is that there are very specific roles you can fall into and just kind of specialize, and you just spend all your time doing that.
Yeah, they're
Like,
very well balanced for
like,
team play.
If you like sniping, you can totally just become like you can totally just hide out on the battlements and just do that the whole game, and nobody will care. Or
Yeah.
if you like going pyro, you totally like if you're defensive, all you want to do is just create absolute chaos when people try to get into your base.
Yeah, and that's what's so good about a lot of the main levels that you see in the most common levels, is that they're all very well balanced. And there's one of the challenges when they're designing the levels was creating those roles for each class. Like if you listen to the developer commentary, they're commenting on one of the control point maps and how they needed to create enough space for snipers while still keeping things closed off just enough for everybody to actually fight together. And I imagine that's a lot of hard work, a lot of iteration and playtest.
So I think so. I usually tend towards attack, defense, payloads, and I
Oh,
also
yeah,
think
payloads.
Like,
Yeah, that's
I also I'm sort of have a soft spot for man versus machine.
Ah,
oh yeah, that's a good one too.
I haven't played Man vs. Machine much.
It's good. It's the co-op version, so there's like essentially waves of zombies coming after you, except replace zombies with robots.
So I remember the marketing showed red players and blue players working together, but then they just changed it to red players with blue robots.
Yeah.
And the robots were supposed to be gray, but they're blue because players were probably shooting at each other.
I mean, it makes sense, like from a programming perspective.
I was thinking like economic perspective too. It's like, oh, how are we going to convey the fact that these two are on different colors but are on the same team, and the fact that there are robots that are gray, which isn't exactly like the most vivid color. So you're like, we don't have that much money, let's just do this.
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting because I think
Or
that's
just like colors.
Okay, but I think that the design choice also makes it, it gives it sort of possibility, because I remember one time playing on a server where they made it so that you could join the blue team with the robots. So fighting the AI. Although of course the red team was of course overpowered with all the upgrades that you could buy, but it does lead to an interesting consequence.
What did? Yeah.
Yeah, in that game mode, I thought it was interesting that they also made the robots based on the classes too.
Yeah.
So like,
It's like,
you
oh no,
fight the classes.
it's the Robo demo.
The Robo Scout's annoying.
The giant, what is it? The giant automatic rocket launcher guy.
You get the heavies enough health that you actually care about them having more health.
I remember I've played that mode like maybe twice or 3 times. And there was one instance when I was a sniper, and there was this big tank going out. And what I did at one point was I just jumped onto the tank and kept sniping at it, and it blew up underneath me. And I'm like, yeah, that wasn't based on a class, was it? Or it was just like a boss at the end of a round or something?
Yeah.
It's provided like a variation in kind. It's like a different type of robot.
Yeah.
You don't get bored of shooting robots. Here's a tank. This is a different type of gameplay. It's kind of boring, but at least it's not.
Everyone's spam heavy.
What did you think of the what's it called? The special delivery mode? Where you have a missile and you need to get something, the Australium.
It's the Australian.
Yeah, it's almost like capture the flag, except there's only one flag, and there's one place to deliver it to. And so when one team captures it, it's like, okay, this team is going, and then the other team needs to make them drop it for a certain amount of time for the flag to get reset, and then they can pick it up and put it on the platform. And the platform rises very slowly, and when it gets to the top, that's when they win. And what do you think of that mode?
Not played it.
I don't really feel like it's completely successful, but I guess it would be, because there's like that point of vulnerability where you have to protect the big Australium going up. But I kind of felt it was kind of drawn out for the entire thing too much.
So when I first played it, I didn't like it that much.
Yeah, I guess.
And it felt like it wasn't balanced enough, maybe.
I feel like you'd have to dominate to win, maybe, or it
Well,
would be too
it-
easy to stop
like-
them when it's rising.
Maybe.
Like
It is
there's-
kind of hard.
There's
Yeah.
like there's like that multi-level part where you can board the thing at
Yeah.
multiple parts, and then the engineers would just rush over there and set up camp over there because that's what they do. And then like while the other people would try to procure the Australian whatever. So in a way that it's kind of not as coherent because you have more freedom of choice whether you want to defend or attack, and either way it's the same thing. It's like the same game, but it's not really. It's not like here's a point, here's another point. Okay, you capture this one, it's on to the next stage of the game. So you don't have as much freedom when it comes to pacing as you give it to the player. So it's like a experiment maybe.
Yeah.
I haven't played it, but that just the way it sounds, it reminds me a lot of the neutral capture the flag. So from like Halo.
Yeah,
And
that's
what
what I was-
happens is there's just it's like normal capture the flag, but instead of a flag spawning at like your base or at the enemy's base, it spawns in the middle. So all the teams or everyone rushes to try and get the flag and carry it either back to their base for like safekeeping for a little bit so they can regroup, or they just try to bum rush the other base and usually die in the process. But
It's interesting, not to say the least. It's just really long and drawn out and boring. Like, no, yeah, I'm sorry.
It's interesting, but it's so boring.
It's like, no offense. Like,
It's
that.
interestingly boring or boringly interesting.
Is it because the maps are made poorly, or is it the gameplay?
I'm not
Well,
sure.
It might be
Is
like
it just that there's not enough like line of sight
So
by the capture point? Is that it? Or
I remember when I first played it, I didn't like it that much, but then I played it some weeks ago, and I really had a lot of fun. And I wonder what changes they made, because I didn't notice any. Maybe they tweaked the maps a little bit.
it might have been the maps.
Yeah.
I think I might be like with the amount of skill the player has too, sort of. Like the balancing that might have changed
Yeah,
something.
there's
but,
definitely
like,
a lot of killing in that mode, because everyone clusters around the tower, and everyone, it's like it's set up in a way where there are a lot of really interesting points that you can set up by and either defend or attack from. And so people just end up killing each other and creating really interesting problems, I think, for people trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to take out those guys up there so that we can level up, so that we can raise the platform this time or something. But I think the map itself, people mainly stick to the missile area, but there's like this long stretch to where you pick up the flag, and that area barely gets any use, really. And there are times when I'm going through that area and I get lost, and like, why am I lost? I know this place, I've been here before. It's like I underestimate how far it is because I never go there, and so I think of it as a really simplified version in my head. Like, oh, it's just a straight line, but it's really not. And so I'm like, I get all confused.
Maybe they should have made it harder to get to the rocket, so you'd actually have to navigate through that more. Like, spend more time, the player would spend more time in that long section, or have more contradicting parts where you could actually kill each other during that long section.
I think the reason it's that long is so that when the thing resets, you actually have to travel some distance to get it back. And because if it's right there, if you're fighting right next to where it resets, then that's probably really imbalanced, because anyone could be there. Yeah.
I think it's like also the learning curve is kind of high for that game.
Oh yeah, it is pretty confusing, especially if you're used to like capture the flag already and you see this thing and like, hey, they captured the flag, and then where's their other place? And like, why are we going in the same spot? Like, I remember when I first played, I thought there were 2 missiles that we had to go to, but there's only 1.
I think some of the discomfort I might have playing with that is because like with a lot of the other modes, there tends to be like in the dynamics of the fighting usually tends to be like sort of a line of attrition, or like where there's like 2 fronts meet and there's fortifications backing those up, and there's like a safe area behind. But on the special delivery, there's really no well-defined boundary. When everyone's clustered around tower, no real well-defined fortifications as well.
Yeah, definitely. I never thought of it that way. It's like basically everyone's reusing the same segment of the map, and so it doesn't feel like it's designed for the encounter between the teams as well as the other modes.
Or it just makes you feel a little bit more paranoid.
Yeah.
I guess.
Because there are times in that mode when you're fighting and like, what's this guy doing on our side of our, like, I think of the map as a T, but when it's really not a T. But I think of it as a T because it's like a big long rectangle with the respawn points right there, basically right next to the rocket place. It's actually not right next to it. It's probably farther away, but the path that you follow makes you feel like you're next to it. Yeah. No. Yeah, payload mode. That's an awesome mode.
I think it's good.
There's the payload, the regular payload, and then there's the payload race. They're both pretty good.
Yeah.
But then I've never seen many good payload race maps other than the High Tower. If that's the name.
Yeah.
High Tower?
Yeah, it's High Tower. I mean, there are a few others like.
There's one like in the nighttime.
Wait, no, not Pipeline.
Pipeline. But those always feel short. The pipeline.
Because they split it up into three chunks.
And when the server respawns, reloads, it changes into a different chunk? Is that what it's like?
Yeah, it's like with Gold Rush, there's 3 zones.
Yeah.
Like that get to where there's a potential for attack and defense for it. Is what with the like pipeline is, I think it's the same. Maybe it's not pipeline. I'm gonna try it. But
The gray
like
one.
So it cuts them up, cuts the maps into 3 zones. Except it's pretty much it's like the same thing except you're both racing. Although I'm not quite sure how that ties into. that ties into winning or losing when you reach the end. That might be a bit strange. Because technically you restart on the next one, but that means both payloads have to be pushed forward to the spawn.
I'm not sure.
I thought that was, when you say splitting up into three parts, when your payload gets there, that's as far as they can go back, right? It's like a checkpoint or not?
Yeah, there's a checkpoint.
Yeah, there's a checkpoint.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Okay.
It was like,
I haven't played those in a while.
But the payload is basically a moving control point in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting the way that like, oh, so you can either be securing the control point or you have to be moving the control point in the way that actually make the players care about pushing the point.
Isn't there a map that has the payload on a train?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and there's like an elevator thing.
no, it's like there's like this
Like
big,
an actual train.
like a
Frontier.
locomotive.
It's
Like-
a train with the chomping teeth on the
Yeah.
Frontier.
Is that only one map or is that like a
I
separate
think
mode?
that's one map where the payload is specifically a train.
Does it kill anyone? Can you run over?
Actually, it
people?
does run over you.
Really?
Yeah.
Does it eat you?
Oh
It
yeah.
doesn't eat you, but it does
So
give you physical
so
death.
that's basically a payload with a platform on it so that multiple people can stand on it. I remember having a lot of fun on that map, and I haven't been able to find it since. It's all sad.
I think some payload maps are really unbalanced, and then some of them have like long narrow passageways, and you're like, oh, no cover for me, great.
Have to like hide behind.
Exactly,
the
hide
payload.
behind the payload card itself.
Yeah.
And
Have some
sometimes that's
big
really
medics.
difficult.
Or like
Especially
there's
when the
like
opposing team
one
is coming
map
towards
where
you.
you can't
Like in
win
Hightower
because
when
engineers-
the big
Yeah.
stretch will go uphill.
Yeah.
It's
That's,
this guy.
that's really hard.
Yep. Game breaker right here.
You're just like 16 kills, and it's only been 2 minutes.
But I think that those hard stretches, they do a lot to manage the pacing of the level, just of the match. Like you're making a lot of progress at the beginning, and then you reach that tough part, and then you make more progress, and then you reach the other tough part. Like in Hightower, the toughest parts are probably that uphill and the end, and I think that works really well. It makes the matches a lot more exciting. Like if the whole match was just a big hill, which I've seen some servers do, that's a pain.
It gets kind of boring. You know, some
It
of
does get
those
boring, yeah.
server maps, it's just like it's not as fun.
But I think those servers are always designed to be pretty short matches. Like it's always whoever gets the lead in the beginning is probably the one who ends up winning.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I generally don't like the payload race maps as much. Is because they tend to be a lot more one-sided. It's a lot more. There's one team that gets their cart going in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then they tend to win. And then
But I think in Hightower specifically, that the big hill, that's like the big chance for the other team to catch up. But I don't think I've ever seen both teams reach the finish at the same time. That would be pretty insane.
We should do that on game night.
Let's cause this to happen. Sabotage.
Do it on purpose.
I'm not sure that would even be possible. Because like, would it be possible? I feel like the game would sort of incorporate some sort of exclusivity. Like it's either one or the other now. So
what if the bombs touch?
Like that one
Those
part in the
explode
beginning where they
everyone
pass.
Eating sandwich party.
But I don't think there's probably not a rule for both people getting at the end at the same time. But I feel like the way it's set up, that map specifically, there's a really short stretch between the end and the hill. And so if one team makes it up, the other team is probably turning all of their resources to stopping that, which means they're not pushing the cart up the hill. So just the mechanics stop you from doing that. Yeah.
I like regular payload better.
I love them both. But yeah, regular payload, I've had a lot of great moments in that mode. I feel like I should play it more. I spend too much time in 2 for it. I remember I was playing with my brother a few months ago, and we played like so many hours of 2 for it. And then we're like, never again 2-4. And then we go to a server that has a modded version of 2-4. Yeah.
It's a good. I seem to recall they're like older game modes that would be fun to like play regularly, but I feel like they sort of swept under the rug because of the fact that they
Which
have-
ones?
Just like the fact that they have one map, like only one map. Like for example, like the territorial control. I mean, that sounds like a really interesting mode.
I might have heard about that. But I
It's like attack and defend, except each map is part of like chunks of a bigger region. And
Yeah.
once one region is defeated, it gets randomly assigned to another one.
that
until,
rings a bell.
Until the entire territory is taken over.
I played that and I got lost and I went all the way back. I was playing blue. I went all the way back to my base when like there was only one point left. And then it was like, we have to go that way, aren't I?
Is there a server that still has this mode up?
A few, but it's like I've had a hard time myself searching for big games. So I've only ever gotten like 2 or 3.
Yeah, I guess the challenge is also just finding other players who want to play that mode.
That's one of the problems with it when you add so many game modes is that it can fracture the user base in a way that makes it so some of them just aren't viable to play on regularly.
Yeah. There are some custom modes. Like I keep seeing these ones called Arena, and I'm not sure what those are.
You just kill each other.
It's like
it's like sudden death, killing each other in sudden death.
yeah, so no respawns.
Yeah.
I think.
And with like wacky items, like oh now you can only use swords or something.
No, that's medieval mode.
I thought Arena was one of the official ones that just got kind of forgotten.
Huh.
Oh yeah.
It
I
might
think
have
I
been.
think so. I think
It might have been.
I think it would be
Arena
more
was
interesting
official.
if that was combined with like RPG elements.
But every time I find an arena server, it's
like
like
after
heavily
you die.
modded. So I think it's a
Minus
a customized user
whatever.
mode.
And if
No,
you
it's
get,
unofficial.
it's like that gun race game.
Oh, the gun game.
Yeah, but yeah, and you get like worse weapons as you get kills. And then if you kill someone with the worst weapon, you win. It's like you start out with overpowered weapons and then you go down. That would be cool as an arena mode.
I was gonna say, have any of you ever tried the multiply weapon stats by 10 server?
Those are
No.
I
What is
want
that?
to try that. I want to get the beggar's bazooka. Load 999 bullets.
But wouldn't everybody just get like a machine gun? and
Died.
Something like really high rate of fire?
Yeah, that's what they do. It's funny.
Okay. Yeah, but
there's like the gunboats that gives you 0 damage, so you can fly around with the rocket with the beggar's bazooka. You just fly around everywhere, and then you rain rockets on people. But your accuracy's so bad, you never hit anybody.
Whereas conversely, you have like the direct hit, which can with the buff now you can one-shot everyone.
One-shot everyone.
But you have to directly hit them.
Well, you play like the spy with the kunai and you get like 999 and no one can kill you. You're just the most OP thing ever. You get a backstab.
And not to mention demo knights, they're like wrecking balls. They hit you with the splendid screen and you're dead.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit last time about TF2's how they make money now that they're free, but we didn't go that deep into it. I remember what
Well,
trading.
do you want you can talk about it.
I don't have that much to say about it because I don't understand it very well.
Well, yeah.
Oh, well,
you
you
want to
might-
say something first. Okay.
Yeah.
In order to have a bigger inventory space, you have to spend at least $5 in the Steam wallet and buy
Yeah.
something for like 10 cents.
No, you just have to buy something, but because it goes to Steam Wallet and because the minimum deposit is $5, then it's basically $5.
You have to, so it's basically you have to pay $5 in the game to enter the trading system and to have all the loot drops and to have all the weapons. So it's sort of like a free trial, but it's technically not. I mean, I haven't
It's
thought it.
It's basically the free to play model, where you get everyone to play for free, and then you make money off of.
But they limit the amount of
Microtransaction.
weapons you can have. I have the
Yeah.
amount of weapons. I don't want to buy it.
That's basically the only reason why I bought anything in the shop is to increase my inventory. And for the longest time, I was like super determined not to buy anything. Like, I'm not gonna fall for this. I'm not gonna buy stuff. I'll just deal with the tiny inventory. And then after a while, I'm like, I love this game so much, I want to support them. So I'll just buy something.
I love League of Legends too, but it's like.
If I tend to I do a lot of research. I do games, but I think so. In looking back, so like before the free to play model, there was some back in the day they released the Man Economy update, and that was the update that gave them the Man Code store, and that was I believe how they tested the viability of a free to play model. They used the store to see if people would buy the weapons and cosmetic items, and they tested the profitability of such an exchange.
So
it turns out it was successful, and they made it free to play.
Did all of the like variations of all the weapons come from that update?
No, I mean there's accumulations of updates. Like there's.
Well, of course, but I mean, like, is that where it started? Did they always have
I mean, like
separate
when they
weapons?
introduced non-stock weapons.
I'm not sure, but I mean, like,
I know they originally the non-stock weapons were just sort of randomly dropped. I know they introduced those long before any sort of like anything you could buy on a store.
okay.
Like there was like the old there was the very old pyro update and the heavy update where they introduced like the extinguisher, and the flare gun, the sandwich, and so on.
That weapon is cool because it's.
Which one?
Sandwich, because it gives you the player is forced to make the choice to change his gameplay to one where he watches a heavy eat a sandwich. And it's like you don't actually do anything. You just watch him eat a sandwich, and it's like a different game. And well, it's like a different gameplay. You're not doing anything.
Well, you are healing health.
Yeah, and it's like that's interesting in the game design.
Is the sandwich a one-use item?
It depends
It
on how you
loads.
use it. Like
If you what?
If you eat it, if you eat it yourself, you just have it. If you throw it out for somebody else, you have to wait for it to respawn or like reload or whatever.
It does recharge over time.
There's visual reward, there's visual reward, and there's a sound reward for and then there's like practicality of it because you're gaining health, but you're not actually doing anything. You're just standing there. You have to decide.
You have to like run into a corner. Nom 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 nom.
You have to decide to do it. Yeah. It's cool from the design stuff, but just it's a different game.
I'm just imagining him doing that on this one King of the Hill map. Like where I know there's this really good corner to hide in.
I mean, like it's kind of successful because you get an achievement for eating a certain amount, and there's like certain people who just get
Oh, yeah.
there and eat.
TF2 has some really great achievements. Like they're just so hilarious to read and to get. It's like, oh, shoot, snipe an invisible spy, or be an invisible spy and bump into another invisible spy.
Backstab somebody while they're looking at your spray.
Yeah.
Eat 100 sandwiches.
Yeah. But yeah, they have like the best achievements I've ever seen. Or I haven't seen that many really. Because I don't have Xbox. But I do have Steam, and I see other achievements. And most of the achievements I've seen on Steam are like, oh, it got to this point in the game. Whereas in TF2 it's like, oh, they did something funny in the game. And they're just so entertaining. And I think they work really well.
And like it encompasses the different experiences that like it categorizes. This is what.
Yeah, and it's also kind of like a metric to measure how advanced you are with a certain character. Like there are some achievements that are like, take this number of people down doing this or something.
And in a way, it's an interesting way of encouraging players to do things that they might not otherwise do. Like, if there's
Like
If
killing
it's not-
killing a soldier while he's rocket jumping.
like, or like just
Doing a headshot when he's rocket jumping.
maybe they wouldn't use otherwise.
Yeah. Patrick's getting tired.
It's a signal, right?
No, it's yoga.
He's just stretching.
We talked about a lot of stuff already. Did you guys know that the voice actress for the announcer is Ellen McLean, who did GLaDOS?
She also did announce part two.
Who did she do?
The voice of Overwatch. Or like the police force
Oh,
were
yeah,
chasing
yeah.
you.
Overwatch
Like,
and
like
episode 2.
Halfway to
Oh, I didn't play episode 2. Darn it.
No.
It's on my wish list. if
Oh,
anyone,
you-
if
you-
anyone wants to give it to
Livio,
me.
you don't have to worry.
Donate.
About it. You have, given the rate that Half-Life 3 is coming out, or Half-Life
The
2
rate.
episode
I
3.
did anyone? I
What is
unplayed
this
it, but I
rate?
was like, oh my gosh,
This
we're
rate.
about to
Is
take
it flat?
Probably like
0.
Oh, I mean,
Negative
like,
for
Yeah, right.
Negative.
It's like the
It's
payload
getting
going
worse.
back.
But if you,
They're
but if you
deleting
time
it.
approach infinity, then it will be infinite, just really, really slow. It's like a logarithm.
So I just
except
need to,
worse.
I just need to wait until infinity.
Maybe. Maybe if
It's a logarithmic function.
maybe
divided
by
by
100 grand
infinity.
kids will have that opportunity.
Maybe in the summer sale I'll get it.
There's an algorithm.
Or you could just
where
play my
it's
copy.
forced to reset to 0.
Oh, how do we do
On my
that?
Xbox.
Oh, is it good on Xbox?
Doesn't matter.
It's-
The controls. I mean,
I like
dual-
the
it's
controls.
dual-
I mean, I don't
it's
like
dual
the controls for TF2, but for Half-Life they work.
cool. I should play it. Game night this Friday.
Game night, bring everything you have. You,
I thought we were
especially
playing
the-
Nintendo.
No,
I thought we were
bringing
playing
the
that other
camera
game.
to sync,
Formal
obviously. We're playing Cooking Mama in real life.
We were thinking about some kind of fundraising thing, but if it wouldn't be at the game night, since it would have to be its own thing.
Maybe it could be at our workshops.
Do we have workshops now?
Do we?
No, we have
No.
the idea.
Video games are fun. Let's put the fun in fundraising.
$1 admission.
F is for friends.
$1 admission, $1 minimum tip.
No.
It's free for $1. This is free.
Or you could just like hold it over their heads. So like, if you donate this amount of money, we'll have it for all tournament. Yeah, that's
Maybe.
what I was thinking the entire time. we were talking.
One person will donate all the money.
And then you'll have the money.
You need a sponsor.
Bitcoins.
I feel like, is there anything else to say about TF2? Any interesting tangents?
Well balanced.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Stair jumping as a
It is
spy
very
is
well
amazing.
balanced. Like everything, like the pacing and
Freaking engineers, though.
just the map.
Engineers.
The reason it's so well balanced is because they just keep updating it and iterating on it.
See, what I do as an engineer is I always see like the other players on my team as my primary weapon. So the first thing I do is set up teleporters.
Nice. Mini sentries.
Yep.
They're easy.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people set up their sentry first and, you know, make little engineer camps, but I'm like, no, I'm just going to move my team forward, stick the receiver teleporter at my spawn, or at our spawn, and then have another one for, like, a forward attack. So we're always, you know, as soon as our guys die, they can just respawn and instantly teleport back into battle. So I'm like, yeah.
I remember when I was first learning how to use the engineer, I set up a portal like right in front of the enemy's spawn, and it was surviving. It's like there was a wall that was protecting it, and I was just hiding there, clanking on it, and it worked. Like it survived for an unbelievably long amount of time, that portal, and a lot of people came through. And I remember because I was still learning it, I spent like 3 hours just making sure it was safe, scouting out the area, And it's like, if anyone saw me, they're like, who is this engineer wasting his time? Wasting everybody's time.
I always find it interesting, like in Man vs. Machine, how it's basically you're customizing the weapon of choice. You know, it could be any weapon. And
Oh, yeah.
It's it's sort of like you're taking the dynamics of that weapon to the limit and see what you can do with it.
Like shooting through targets.
Yeah, penetration.
That's like my favorite one, just because I always play a sniper and I like to snipe through stuff.
Explosive headshot.
Yeah.
That is the most important thing.
But yeah, that's really interesting how they added that weird upgrade mechanic. And it really confused me when I was learning how to play that mode.
I love upgrading things.
And like, is this tied to the man code store in any way? I hope not. Because it's like a little store.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that did confuse me at first because I open it up and there's money and I'm like, I don't want to buy things. I'm confused. This better not be $500 from my Steam account. That would be unfortunate.
That could be a great April Fool's joke. They should have done that. Think of how many angry emails they would have gotten. Request to close accounts. Yeah, that's basically everything. We have a game night on Friday. Be there.
What do you game?
Be here, actually.
Be here.